day. So I think they'll be doing a couple of pieces for you. So we really have a lot in store. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Jack Foley and also a little bit about Sangye Land first. Jack Foley has published poetry, criticism, stories, and a 1,300-page history of California poetry from 1940 to 2005. Talk about a mapping project right there, invaluable. He achieved prominence in the San Francisco Bay Area through his duets with his late wife, Adele, a practice he has continued with his current life partner, Sangye Land. He has presented poetry on radio station KPFA regularly since 1988. I believe it's a weekly show that he does to this day, and is currently one of the hosts of KPFA's literary program, Cover to Cover. And that would be the program that's weekly. He has received 2 Lifetime Achievement Awards, one from Marquee Who's Who, and one from the Berkeley Poetry Festival, along with K.M. Anthru Literature Prize from Literature RW in India. Lawrence Ferlinghetti remarked that Jack Foley is doing great things in articulating the poetic consciousness of San Francisco. Sangye Land is a lifelong poetry enthusiast and Jack Foley's new partner in both life and performance. She has helped edit manuscripts written by her mother, poet Julie Rogers, and lived with her mother and her stepfather, poet David Meltzer, during the final year of Meltzer's life. She is a student of Buddhism and a volunteer for TLC, Transitional Life Care, a Buddhist end-of-life nonprofit education program located in Alameda. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that pin, and here we all are here for you. Hello, Jack. Hello, Sangye.
Hello, Sophia. One interesting thing about Sangye's name, incidentally, it's Sangye Land. Sangye means Buddha in Tibetan. So it comes out Buddha Land.
That's where I want to live.
Yeah, right. Yes, exactly. Good place.
That's such a compassionate practice, Sangye. That's beautiful. How long have you been doing that practice?
I mean, working for TLC?
No, the practice.
Well, Buddhism and also with TLC.
Well, I was raised as a Buddhist, born and raised. And TLC, I've been working and helping out for, I think, 6 or 7 years.
That's
the same as our relationship, actually.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, would you like to say a few words before you begin in with the first piece that you'll be sharing with us today, Ukraine? Or would you like to start right in?
Asking you.
You're asking me or asking her?
I'm asking you, Mr. Jack Foley.
Oh, okay. I guess we'll start right in and let me see here.
All right, you have the floor.
All right. This is a multi-voice piece. I became noted for doing multi-voice pieces, and it's important for me. One of the things I say all the time is some parts of the mind don't know what other parts of the mind are doing. You can't represent that with an I because it's contradictory, or at least in a state of tension. So how do you do it? You're going to write a poem. And you'll see another use of a second voice when we do a poem by Baudelaire. Ukraine,
Drops fall
My love
from the faucet.
has gone from me.
Rain defines us.
Her address
Articulates
unknown.
the border
Her clothing,
of our world.
her
We
books,
see the dead
sprawled
sprawled on the street
aimlessly
as we gaze
in the apartment.
at the internet.
She said nothing,
Drops fall.
wrote nothing.
The dead
She took the car.
are voiceless.
I do not know
Not rage,
if she is alive.
but bewilderment.
Can love vanish?
The rage
Can what was once
follows.
satisfactory
It is April,
change suddenly
and the brutality
and end
of men
like the falling of the leaves
once again
that signals
thickens.
winter?
Ah, that's beautiful. Could
The
you do,
falling of the leaves applies both sides.
I almost want to ask you to do it again, but I guess you'll be doing another piece for us. Is that right?
Yes, even more complicated actually piece, but the voices relate to one another differently in that one. But yeah, you can read it. One of the things that you discover with the way in which poetry is presented is now that we've got, for a number of years now, almost 100 years maybe, we've had means to record people reading poetry. And one of the discoveries you make is that one of the things it's shown, we assume that when you read a poem, et cetera, it's the same as when you get it out of the book. And what you get from the book is the same as what you get from your ear. But in fact, the new modes, digital, whatever, give the lie to that. They show the limitations of writing as a way of showing poetry. There are limitations writing can give you all kinds of things. It can't give you two voices speaking simultaneously. There's no way you can put column A and column B like a Chinese restaurant, but the physical impact of it isn't there. I have some poems in which that physical impact isn't mightily insisted upon. I think you've heard some of them, but that's part of why there are two voices here. I thought to myself, why am I doing these things? I have this sense of mind being a multiple place, that the reason we see multiplicity in the world is because we have multiplicity in our minds. And that multiplicity can't be expressed by a speaker. In fact, in one of the things I do in this book, though I won't be reading from them, I have poems called pairings. And pairings will allow you, there's not a single speaker. There aren't even two speakers. The speakers are two different poems that have nothing to do with one another, except they do. They both connect and disconnect at the same time. And that seems to me interesting and closer to what we mean when we think of thought.
I'm glad you brought up the pairings. I'm going to ask you a little bit more about that later on. It's a major feature of this book, is where you place two poems side by side on the page. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But I want to thank you, Sangye, for joining us for this reading today, and for both of you reading that piece. It was beautiful. So I'd like to go ahead and, if I may, interview you, Jack, now for...
I'm going to switch this just a little bit so that I'm the center of attention.
Okay. All righty then. So I know a lot of the people that are joining us today know you quite well. And so today, some of the questions I'm asking are going to be a little bit of a review, but I'm a real fan of eternity and of archival value of things. So when I'm talking to you today and doing this book launch, I'm thinking that this will be in special collections libraries 50 years from now or 100 years from now, transferred into the new kind of technology that they have at that time. So I am going to ask you a few kind of basic questions about yourself and your career as a writer. just things that others that are joining us today are not aware of, that I think that they should be aware of. And the first thing that I'd like to talk about is the huge project you did where you were sort of mapping California poetics from 1940 to 2007, was it?
2005. It came out around 2005. The 1940 was my birth year. That's one of the reasons I started there. The other reason was it was the moment when it's California poetry, and it was the moment when Kenneth Rexroth published his first book. And Kenneth Rexroth was a mighty influence upon California poetry. So it sort of starts with Rexroth and then sort of moves throughout. And it's different from other books. Usually in a book about, a historical period or whatever you want to call it, usually in books, there's a speaker, and we assume that there's this speaker who knows things and is telling you things. That's not quite the case with Visions and Affiliations, which is the name of the book. Visions and Affiliations, somebody called it a I think it was a psycho-encyclopedia, something like that. A chrono-encyclopedia.
Okay.
And this chrono-encyclopedia has a number of voices. Now, my voice is in there too, but it's not at the center telling you about everything. There are moments when I speak up, and the juxtapositions of things are very important. I thought a lot about that. And so what you get is all these voices talking at one another, agreeing, disagreeing over all this period. And that's what you read as you go along. Now, in most places, the author will try to make the connections for you and tell you what it all means. I don't know what it all means. I do know that there's this conflicting, marvelous, energetic mode of speech that you get from all of these people talking at one another, some of them forgotten, some of them famous, etc., but all talking. It's like, for me, old radio. I grew up with old radio, which are disembodied voices. And it was an interesting subject. I've written about it. There's a lot to say about old radio. I won't go into that, but old radio was disembodied voices. That's what you get in this book. They're all disembodied voices. Disembodied voice went up the radio.
So you mentioned Kenneth Rexroth. Now, am I correct? And was he Jaffe Ryder in Jack Kerouac's?
No. Jaffe Ryder was
Harry Snyder.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Okay. They rhyme.
Okay. I'm not sure why I confused those.
He does show up there because Kerouac covers the 1955 reading when the Sixth Gallery reading when Ginsberg read Howl. I forget what he calls him in the book, but it isn't Jaffe Ryder. Jaffe Ryder is actually much more in the next book, and in which he really talks about Gary Snyder and haiku and all of that. That's less so in On the Road, but there were all these people. Some of them were from here, some of them were Beats, some of them were not. People like William Everson. And there was a tension in all of them between the New York people who were publishing and who had venues, and the people here who had to make up their own venues. Mostly they didn't publish in New York. Rexroth had the ear of the people who were doing New Directions, James Loughlin. And because he had the ear of James Loughlin, for a time, New Directions was almost a California house. It published McClure, it published Everson, it published Snyder, it published all kinds of people. And then they stopped doing it. And they had to find other people to publish them. But initially, there was this tremendous amount of excitement. And also, a lot of it was competitive. I mean, Robert Duncan was in a competitive relationship with practically everybody. Brilliant.
Really? I didn't know that about him. I mean,
yes. Yeah. And with all kinds of his friends, etc. I mean, there's a lot to say about that. It's all in the book.
I'm sure. It's a lot of gossip.
It's not hard to write. You say, oh, what a monumental book, 3,000 pages, 2 volumes.
Yeah.
But it wasn't hard to write because what I was doing was somebody had asked me to look over a timeline that they were using. They had interviewed me and they were publishing the interview and they had included a timeline. Would I look it over, comment on it? I did that and I added some stuff. And so there was this little interview and this little timeline. And then somebody said to me, Dana Joy actually said to me, why don't you do that as a book? It's a good idea. And so we talked about that and it just growed like Topsy. And, I had a file and I would put things in it. I finished it about 5 times. And each time I finished it, I thought, oh my God, I left that out. How could I have left that out?
And it's just such a huge, comprehensive project. And I mean, California Poetics is so seminal for the international literary perception of American poetics. For some reason, they did a really good job. Like every poet that I meet in China, where I've spent 20 years of my life, they all know who the beat poets are. They all know who Ginsberg is.
Allen Ginsberg was the greatest publicity man the world has ever known.
And that's how they come to know contemporary American poetics. They have no idea what's happening in the last 20 years, but they all know. So if they were to read your book, what do you think they would realize about California poetics and American poetics that they hadn't realized before?
They'd realize something about their own minds, because that's what the book does. In most places, if you read a book, the author makes the connections for you and tells you, and that's fine. You do that. I don't do that here. And people have reacted to the book as, that's amazing, it's extraordinary. It's a very strong reactions. And these very strong reactions arise because I don't make those connections. I leave them to the people, though I make suggestions. I push in certain directions. It's not totally chaotic, though it is chaotic. It's just not totally chaotic. And I push in a certain direction. I juxtapose things with thoughts in mind, but I don't necessarily make them explicit. And so you come away with it, having made these discoveries yourself. You come away with it with a sense of the complexity and almost infinite sense of your own mind as you read it. And people love it for that. They're listening to all these people. You say, oh my God, 15 years ago, he said that. And look what's happening now. And the whole book is like that. It's a potpourri of all these voices that are continually speaking and arguing and going back and forth. And I do still things. I situate it historically. I have historical notes, background, what's happening, like World War II. I mean, stuff. You tell stuff.
Wow.
And
so it almost sounds like a book that we need to maybe do another version of with Igneus sometime in the future.
If you'd like to, I have copies. I haven't sent you a copy yet. It's expensive to mail. It's also in my old age, I'm discovering it's hard for me to mail things. I tend to do less of it than I used to do when I was younger.
Well, Jack, we could talk about that project forever. We are going to keep today's, we've both worked pretty hard and planned out a really nice program. Keep it within an hour. I do want to let you know, Jack, that we've got a lot of people that are jumping in on the comments and joining us here today from all over the country. They're really enjoying the talk, the backstory of all the names. We've got people from Durango, Colorado, from all over the place, El Paso, Texas, and people are really chiming in. Thank you, everybody, so much for being a part of the conversation. That's really valuable. But Jack, the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about is something that is one of my favorite parts of your book, Creative Death, and it's the Orphic Sonnet. And we haven't had a chance to talk about it, but the Orphic Sonnets. And
a lot of that began when I was at Cornell. I was about 20, 21, something like that. And I started to write a poem about Orpheus. I'd seen Cocteau. I knew what the myth was. I read about it. I'd seen Cocteau's Orpheus. It was marvelous.
Could you just give us the, you know, in a nutshell, the myth of Orpheus? I mean, I know it, you know it, and most of us here today know it, but
actually, I have a poem that tells the story.
Uh-huh.
I can read that poem now if you want.
Would you be able to get to it immediatamente?
Pretty much.
While you're looking for it, there are two Orphic Sonnets that I would like.
It's on 26 and 27, but there's also, that's the poem that was illustrated by a marvelous artist whose paintings are in the book. You can see one on the cover.
Oh, did you want to read that right now?
Sure. If you want me to tell the story, I tell it better there than I could just talking about it.
All right, everybody. I'm going to share the image of the beautiful painting by Jerry Fabiano. We have, is it 3 or 4 of his illustrations in this book, Jack?
I think 3. And then there's a collage by Mark Fisher, which is quite a wonderful collage. I'm in a fishbowl. Mm-hmm. A Fisher bowl, maybe. But this is an Orphic story.
Yeah, this painting here is by Jerry Fabiano. So this is give you a sample of the beautiful, beautiful illustrations that are in this book, Creative Death.
What happened to me was way back when I was in my early 20s at Cornell, maybe even, I must have been 20. I started to write a poem about Orpheus. And the poem was okay. I wasn't sure I liked it. And I went back to it, and not long after writing it. And I started to write another poem. I took the opening lines, 4 or 5 lines, and started to write another poem. The other poem took total possession of me. I didn't know what it meant. It was a telling of the Orpheus story, certainly, and a reference to it. And there were influences, things like Pound's Morbally was an influence. But it was a poem that insisted upon itself. And as I wrote it, I had no idea why one thing was following another. It was not planned, nothing. And then the poem ended. It was one of the most extraordinary experiences I've ever had. Every once in a while in my life, something like that happens to me. And that moment, that epiphany, is a moment in which I'm being told, even if I don't understand it for the moment, I'm being told the direction I'm going to go. Even if I don't know, even if I can't really follow it at that moment, I may be able to in a year. And that's what happened to me. Now, this poem I'm going to read you, which is the Orphic story, but redone slightly by me. And you see references to it, you'll see, in Jerry's painting. Oh, one other thing. People, all of us tend to, as Montgomery Clift said, Alfred Hitchcock wanted Montgomery Clift to walk a block. He needed something in between. He was supposed to be in one place, then in another. He needed to show him walking to it. And Hitchcock asked Montgomery Clift, would you mind, he was playing a priest, would you mind walking this block? Clift looked at him very intensely. He was an actor studio person, you know, looked at him very intensely and said, what's my motivation? It's also asked by Paul Newman, whose fee was incredible. Hitchcock answered Newman by saying, the amount of money we're paying you, that's your motivation. But we tend to think of everything as having motivation. That was not true for many, many, many classical stories. There's no motivation. Something just happens. Why does the ancient mariner shoot the albatross? There's no reason for it. He just does it. Is there a motivation for Adam? Well, he gets the apple from Eve, and Eve is deceived by the serpent, etc. But largely, there's no psychological process we can follow which tells us why it all happened. It just happens. And it's something we have to deal with. Okay. I tried to get back to that sense of motivation in this poem. The man followed the woman into death, hoping to bring her back. There was a door, or something he called a door, that led to a long corridor lit with torches, flickering light everywhere, until finally another door. An endless meadow appeared, Flowers he had never seen bloomed riotously. No one was there, but there was a table filled with food. Something told him not to eat, though he felt a sudden, ravenous hunger. Had you eaten, said a voice, you would have joined us. He turned, and there was something like a hologram speaking to him. He felt a sudden revulsion, but answered, I am searching for my wife. I know, said the vision. You will find her there. He pointed to a small tree Orpheus had not seen before. Lying there, dreaming, was Eurydice, the wind stirring her hair. Orpheus took down his lute and began to play. All around Eurydice, flowers appeared, at once enclosing, protecting, trapping her. She woke and seeing him, smiled. We have lived this story, she said, thousands of times. Each time you rescue me and turn, and I remain among the dead. It will be no different this time, though I'm ready to follow you if you ask. He stopped playing and beckoned to her. They walked slowly towards the door that had led to the meadow. As they walked, they began to age, gradually at first, and then quickly, from youth to age to old age. Both had difficulty walking, even the short space that led to the door to the upper world. Orpheus could no longer sing. His breath was so short. Eurydice began to lose her beauty, becoming an old, old woman. Orpheus muttered, only half heard by his wife, the door is not far. The door is not far. And then, without meaning to, without wishing it, compelled by the story, he turned. The old, old woman behind him vanished without a sound. And I should have perhaps mentioned that the condition by which Orpheus could lead her out was that he not turn around as he led her out. And of course, every time he does it, as he repeats it, as I say, he always turns. It's in the story. There's nothing he can do about it. It's not his will. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want to. You can make excuses. Oh, there's a noise behind him and he turns to see it. But that's not in the story. It's just that he turns. Mm-hmm. And then he has to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And my Orphic sonnets are dealing with that situation from that point of view, the point of view of having lost Eurydice. And yes, there's an obvious connection to the fact, I'd been married. We'd been married almost 55 years. So Adele died, and yes, there's a connection there, of course. But there are more connections. I mean, there's no dearth of Eurydices. The woman who designed a beautiful cover to one of my books and who was a young woman in her 40s just died. No dearth of Eurydices.
Indeed. You know, I've never really, firstly, thank you so much. That was a beautiful reading of that piece.
Thank you.
Powerful. I've never quite understood the part of that myth where Orpheus can lead Eurydice out of hell, but if he turns back, she will be lost to him again.
Turns back, just looks around, turns around, not turns back, just looking, doing that. That's all it is.
I never understood why that condition was placed. I mean, what does that represent? That Hades would place that stipulation upon the
story. It's not, there's no motivation, there's no reason. It's the story. You can do everything. You can move mountains. You can move animals you can make animals speak that couldn't speak. You can do anything as long as you play your lute. But you can't do that. and there's a limitation. And it's the loss that's at the center of all lives. I mean, that's the reason, if there has to be a reason, that all lives, even those of a magical, wonderful poet who can use his poetry to do things no one else can do, even there's a loss in his life too. And there's nothing you can do about that. It's just part of what's given you. Those are the cards that you are given. And as a person, that's part of it. Loss is part of what we are. But it's not his fault. And he doesn't get distracted.
I'm going to start crying. Okay.
You know, he's not distracted by something behind him, so he turns for that reason. It's only the way life is.
Well, it's a little bit of a somber note, but the name of the book is Creative Death. So here we are. We knew what.
Perhaps I should read the title poem, actually.
Creative
Perhaps I should read the title poem, which talks about that.
Well, Jack,
how death is. Yeah.
Okay, well, if you feel.
Or do you want to go on?
Oh, yeah, I see you didn't have that in the lineup. Absolutely, we need to have that. You read that. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Two of the lines are swiped from Garcia Lorca. Some people know it and some people don't. The third and fourth line is swiped from Garcia Lorca, as they say in certain parts of Spain. Creative Death. I'm considering calling a book Creative Death. For I know that oranges don't grow in the sea, and there is no love in Seville. I do not mean my own death, but the death of others near me, deaths which tear me apart, but which I survive. These are deaths that allow for growth and transcendence. The dark figure in the shadows, emerging suddenly with a lamp. Cessation of breath to breathing. Death's shaping hand on mine. There is another circle of life in which we do not necessarily believe. One that exists in some parallel world to this and shows itself here only in glimpses. Birds, for example, are souls there, but only birds here. Unless one escapes the boundaries and enters an avian receptor. And then the soul watches our world and participates, but does not let us know that where it originated, it was of royal blood and could bless whomever it chose and can do so even in this world. We know these birds only in story, where we call them angels, messengers, alive with a reality that cannot be measured or understood, but like a poem, experienced only as a fiction of words. For Robert Adamson, 1943 to 2022.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gosh, I don't know how you live in your own soul, Jack. There's just so much to feel. I can see you feel very deeply, and
well, you get to be 80. There's a lot of stuff floating around, but the thing is that one of the things is that if you still got your marbles. One of the things I do best throughout my life, this has been true, is to see patterns. I make connections that other people don't. One of the reasons I like Freud is because Freud made connections that other people didn't know. I mean, how can you make a connection between the cradle, the childhood, etc., and an ancient Greek myth? What a crazy thing to do, and yet there it is, and the illumination comes from that connection, the Oedipus complex, and many other things, etc. That kind of mind is the kind of mind I have, and for good or ill. And because I've lived a lot, and I've read a lot, and I've thought a lot, I have thoughts daily. Sangye can tell you all about that.
I know a little bit about that. I'm on your email list.
Right, exactly. And you know, so that's been my situation. I have enormous luck in having Sangye and having you and having some of the people who are watching now as people who will listen to me.
You're being humble.
Yeah, but an audience makes a big deal. I mean, for a long time, I really didn't become known as a poet or start to be known as a poet until I was 45 years old. Or really 45, 1985. I'd been writing before that. I was writing since I was 15, but I had no audience. So 30 years.
Yeah,
I had zero audience. A few people who might be interested was not because they were interested in my writing, it was because they were interested in me and they'd ask about it. But they had no knowledge necessarily of poetry. What happened was I did a reading finally with Ivan Igneus, who invited me to read with him, and people came to see Ivan and they saw Adele and me as well. And at that reading, I mean, people were sort of blown away. We did oral pieces. And I had a long poem that I did that I'd written for Ivan because I felt I needed to write something for him, my discoverer, etc. And suddenly, for the first time, people wanted to know me because of my writing, not the other way around. People didn't want to know my writing because they knew me. It was the other way around. They wanted to know me because of my writing. I was 45 years old, and it was the first time it happened to me.
And you ran with it.
And I ran with it.
Yeah, you did.
I did this, you know, it was
long and far.
1985 was my first reading. I had my own radio show 3 years later, in 1988.
And you still have that radio show?
Yes, it's going through a certain amount of metamorphoses, but yes, I still have that radio show.
It's on Tuesdays at what time?
At 2 to 2:30.
2 to 2:30.
Sometimes I do it with Nina Serrano, and then it's from down 2 to 3, but I'm still on the 2 to 2:30 part.
Gotcha. And people can go ahead on kpfa.org and
see it there. They can also, if you tune in on, you know, a more conventional thing like a radio, if you're in your car, 94.1 FM.
Oh, it's 94.1. Okay. Well, I'm glad you mentioned Ivan, because I did want to tell our listeners, and again, I want to thank everybody so much for all your comments. And Deb Ewing is in there. Deb Ewing is our global content editor and resident polymath, and she's in there answering everybody's comments, and everybody's really chiming in. It's just wonderful. Thank you so much. It just really, we've got quite a community here, Jack, right now at this reading. And so your first was in 1985, and I'm really honored to be hosting this reading with you here today. But to circle back to Ivan, who wrote a wonderful review of your book, which is on the Igneus website, and we'll be distributing that across our platforms beginning early next week. But I wanted to go ahead because you have in Creative Death an exchange with Ivan, or you call him Ivan, and it's on. He
calls himself Ivan despite the diacritical mark.
Okay.
Just recently that he puts the diacritical mark, but he still calls himself Ivan.
Well, you have actually more than one call and response in this book, but one of the calls and responses pieces that you have is with Ivan. And so he writes a piece named Epilion, and then you respond, and both of the pieces are in the book. And what I wanted to ask you about today, Jack, was the very end of that piece. I was reviewing it again, looking through it again, and the line really struck me. And it says that the very, very last line of your response to Ivan's call is that hell is the home of the unreal and of the seekers for happiness. It is the only refuge from heaven, darkness. Now, there are the two large notions in there that were very new for me. And I wanted to ask you, since I have this opportunity, for a little bit of explanation. Like, hell is the home of the unreal. Could you talk about that?
Sure. I'm swiping it. It's not my original thought. When I was a child, one of the people who I read was Bernard Shaw. I was a good Catholic kid, but Shaw will take care of that. Androcles and the Lion, the play is about this long. The preface is about that long, and it's all about Christianity. And Shaw wrote a play called Man and Superman. And in the middle of Man and Superman, there is a section called Don Juan in Hell. And it's a great section. I actually saw, it can be performed separately, and it was. I saw a marvelous performance of it in New York City. And Adele had arranged as a birthday gift, a full performance. It turned out, I thought Don Juan in Hell would be cut out because it usually is when they perform Man and Superman, which is, it's inserted in it, but you can take it out and you can just play the play. Because it doesn't have, it has something to do, it's a relationship to the play, but it's not a plot relationship. You don't need it in terms of the plot. So a lot of productions have put it on without, without having that in it. So it was like in Walnut Creek. And I thought to myself, Jesus Christ, you want me to go to a Shaw play in Walnut Creek? I was convinced it would be really, a travesty. I was convinced it would be Shaw, and I loved Shaw. So we go, and they put the whole goddamn thing on, and it was wonderful, including the Don Juan in Hell section. It was the whole thing. So I was speaking lines almost in my head, sometimes aloud, as the actors did, because I knew the play so well. And I was so moved. And so I wrote something. I wrote a little play in which Shaw goes to hell in the way that his Don Juan figure goes to hell. The play was called Scaevius Diabolus. Scaevius, because that's the way Shaw referred to himself. Shaw, Scaevius, he Latinized it. And then Diabolus, he meets a devil. It's not the devil, but he meets a devil. And it's a one-act play and a brief play, a 10-minute play. It was put on, etc. And so part of what I was answering Ivan with was what Shaw, my response to Shaw. My play had a choral piece that is mostly what I'm answering Ivan with in that poem. And for Shaw, hell is the realm. We usually think of hell as the place, as my father used to say, I got friends both places. But when I die, it doesn't matter. I got friends in hell. I got friends in heaven. Buster Keaton had a crucifix in one pocket as a corpse. He had a crucifix in one pocket and a pair of dice in another. So he was ready for both places, etc. That kind of thing. In this play, Shaw experiences something of what the characters in Man and Superman experience, and it was as a result of that. And for Shaw, hell is what we all kind of like. It's comfortable. It's full of art. It's not. It's good bourgeois, upper bourgeois life. It's they go to plays, they read books, they're intelligent, etc. That's what hell is. What heaven is the place where people strive. Heaven is the place where they reject all of those things that hell puts forward and go on into something more, the life force. And that's what I was referring to at the end of that poem. Hell is the place, of unreality. Heaven is where you go if you want the real.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So what was the name of that particular play once again?
Man and Superman.
Man and Superman.
In the middle of it is a segment, a kind of one-act play that he puts in the middle of his play called Don Juan in Hell. Mm-hmm. The players, the play itself has people who are like Don Tanario is Don Juan, his ancestor. Don Juan is his ancestor, that kind of thing. It has that kind of relationship to the Don Juan story, but he puts that's where he puts it. That the devil is such an intelligent, nice man. He can't understand why Don Juan wants to get out of hell.
Well, Jack, you know, you wouldn't believe it, but we are already, it's 5:15, and I know you've got an amazing lineup of poems that you'd like to share with us. And I think that's why everybody's really here. I think hopefully people have enjoyed the tidbits that they've gleaned from our interview, but I'd like to, if you wouldn't mind, transition back to the reading and hearing more from you.
Why don't we hear more from Sangye and me?
Let's do it.
Okay. Sangye's moving over. Now you've got something nice looking to look at, etc. Get into the picture, sweetheart. All right. I have to introduce this poem. It's a poem by Baudelaire. It's called Litanies of Satan. It's a great poem, and it opened up certain things. But it's got a problem. One of the lines in it is, "Oh, Satan, prends pitié de ma longue misère." Now, Baudelaire doesn't leave Satan with the Christian tradition by any means. He turns him into something else. But, "Oh, Satan, prends pitié de ma longue misère." That's, "Oh, Satan, take pity on my long misère." What does misère mean? It means poverty. Les Misérables in Hugo's book means the poor people of Paris. That's what it means. But Baudelaire has a liturgical mind. These are litanies. And he's surely thinking of something that shows up in the Mass, in Dante, in all kinds of places, which is the basis of misère in French. The Latin root of misère is miserere. And there's a line, miserere mei, forgive me, O Lord. Now, if you translate misère as poverty, that's a correct translation. It's the right translation. But you don't get the overtone of miserere, forgive me, O Lord. If you translate it as misery, which is an inaccurate translation, you get the overtone, but you don't get the meaning of the word. So you have to do something about that. This is what we did. Litanies of Satan. O thou, most knowing and most beautiful of angels, God betrayed by fate, denied praise. O Satan, take pity on my long misery. O Prince of exile, wronged, who vanquished stands up again, stronger. O Satan, take pity on my long misery. You who know everything, great king of the underground, familiar healer of human agonies. O Satan, take pity on my long misery. You who even to lepers, to damned pariahs, teach through love the taste for paradise. O Satan, take pity on my long misery. You who begot hope, that charming madwoman, on your old and powerful lover death. O Satan, take pity on my long misery. You who give to the outlaw a look so high and calm and bold, it damns the people beneath the scaffold. O Satan, take pity on my long misery. You who know in what corners of envious lands the jealous God hid precious stones. O Satan, take pity on my long misery. You whose clear eye knows the deep arsenals where sleep shrouded the people of metals. O Satan, take pity on my long misery. You whose vast hand hides the precipices from the sleepwalker wandering on the edge of edifices. O Satan, take pity on my long misery. You who make supple again the old bones of the drunkard out late and trampled by horses. O Satan, take pity on my long misery. You who to console frail man who suffers, teach us to mix saltpeter and sulfur. O Satan, take pity on my long misery. You who place your mark, O subtle accomplice, on the brow of the pitiless vile Croesus. O Satan, take pity on my long misery. You who put in the eyes and heart of girls the cult of the wound and the love of rags. O Satan, take pity on my long misery. Staff of exiles, lamp of inventors, confessor of the hanged and of conspirators. Oh, Satan, take pity on my long misery. Adoptive father of those who in his black and angry guise God the Father drove from the earthly paradise. Oh, Satan, take pity on my long misery. Glory and praise to you, Satan, in the heights of the sky where you reigned, and in the depths of hell where vanquished you dream in silence. Allow my soul to rest near you one day under the tree of knowledge, at the hour when on your brow, like a new temple, its branches grow. That creates Oscar Wilde. It creates the poet Maudit, the damned poet. It creates an enormous amount of things. And it redefines Satan as the God of knowledge. Thou most beautiful, most knowing of the angels.
Thank you, Jack. I'm just going to let you go on and continue. I'm not going to speak again until you're finished.
All right, okay. What do we have? We have about 10 minutes. Okay, we're going to read, since I was described as somebody who does something for San Francisco, I'm going to read a poem about the Maltese falcon. One of the things that's interesting is that people don't know that under the pressure of editors, people who wrote pulp had to be very careful about sexual references and things like that. And they would often take something that really was dirty, put it in the text, and then put it near something that sounded dirty but wasn't. And the editor would get the thing that sounded dirty and wasn't. And they'd miss the thing that was really there. And there's a word in this poem and in the Maltese falcon all over the place, gunsel. It's a Yiddish word. It means a little goose, but that's not what it means. A gunsel is a boy kept for homosexual purposes by a homosexual, by an older homosexual. He's a gunsel, a little goose. That's the only meaning the word had in Hamlet's day. But it's in the book and it's in the movie. And the underworld love to see movies about themselves. I believe it was a gangster movie that Dillinger saw the day he walked out of the theater and was gunned down. And gunsel was picked up by the underworld and they started using it as a word meaning someone who carries a gun. Hammett changed the meaning of the word. Forgive the itchy nose I have here. The Maltese Falcon on the BBC, a review. I listened to the Maltese Falcon tonight, a 1984 BBC radio production starring Tom Wilkinson in the Bogart role. As good as Bogart, but entirely different. British, but with a spot-on American accent. They had more time than the famous film, so more of the book could be included, though, like the film, they did not include the chapter in which Spade, the blonde Satan, tells Miss Wonderly a story that has to do with the utterly chaotic nature of the world. The sudden shifts were all there, and they were more explicit about Joel Cairo's sexual orientation. He's queer, says Effie. American jazz was played, including Love for Sale, between the dramatic segments, and one was impressed, as always, with Hammett's marvelous dialogue. It was all about men, including policemen, drinking. It was all about male intelligence and disrespect. Spade's intellect constantly moved ahead of ours. Bridget O'Shaughnessy was clever, but Spade saw through her. He understood everything better than anyone in the way that Sherlock Holmes understood things, though Spade did not have Holmes' mythic stature. I was mesmerized once again by this San Francisco tale, important that it was not New York, in which we are on Spade's side, not because he is moral, but because he is right. Because in the chaos of night and fog and murder in a little San Francisco alleyway to which a woman invites you, and ambivalence about sexuality. All of the villains are gay, and fear of women whom you desire, but who may betray. Tonight, a woman asked me, please forgive me. Amid all this, Spade walks freely and applies his intellect and uses women out of the fear that they may use him. You're an angel, sweetheart, and does not carry a gun, but don't forget, I've got the guns, and despises the boy, the gunsel who follows him. The word had only one meaning in Hammett's time, and slaps the queer Joel Cairo. When I slap you, you'll take it. Amid all the complexity of this author's mind and the image of a magical, satisfying bird who will solve all problems, but who remains ungrasped, I listened. Sam, how could you do this to her? She killed Miles, precious. I know you're right, Sam, but don't touch me. My childhood lived amid so much of this, the threat of violence, worse even than the violence itself. That's my Sam Spade poem. We'd have time. You want to open it for some questions, or should I read something else?
Oh, I definitely think that we should read another piece or two. Did you want to read Rat Talk and then Homage to Hillary?
Okay.
Okay.
Rat Talk is a long poem, and I'm just going to read the end of it. It's a lengthy poem. I've always written lengthy poems of some consequence, and I know that by and large, magazines don't publish a long poem. They want to publish as many poems as possible, and so they don't publish a long poem. I wrote long poems. Speaking of his film, Natural Born Killers, the movie director, Oliver Stone, said, "Violence? I'm against violence. But did you expect me to make a dull movie?" She stood before me with a smoking gun, looking down at her husband's dead body. "I didn't do it," she said. I believed her. What happens is not that there is the book and there is ourselves as individuals and they're in a relationship. What happens is that we enter the field of language. Language generates a world in which it is the primary event, in which it postulates reality. The power of rhetoric is that it creates an area which depends upon its own context, its own connections. Though we may respond to a book about fathers with thoughts about our own father, or a book about mothers with thoughts about our mother, that is not the primary thing that is happening to us. What is happening is that we're being pulled into a world that is deeply and essentially not this world. And we enter into it happily in order to escape what is precisely our individuality. All rhetoric is fiction. All reading is empathy and escape. I enjoy writing between the lines, lines other people have written. Jesus, as Henny Youngman. Take me, please. I tell you, he was the first Jew to do stand-up. Behold my mother, yuck, yuck, yuck. Mrs. Nussbaum writes a book. Ah, Mrs. Nussbaum, I understand you have written a new book. Have I written a new book, Mr. Allen? I have written a new tone. My husband Pierre says he should put it next to the door to stop the door. A door stopper, eh, Mrs. Nussbaum? You shouldn't drop it on your foot, Mr. Allen. Is it next to the bed for bedside reading? The book is not only next to the bed, it almost is the bed. Pierre put a blanket on it and got in. He finally got to sleep at chapter 6. Well, we'll be looking for it in the bookstores, Mrs. Nussbaum. They are giving away with it a free blanket. Arrivederci, Mr. Allen. Gratitude to Gershwin for that moment of utter magic, guiding me, a child, with his consummate mastery into the deepening dark. The Living Air for Susan Landauer, 1958 to 2020. No life, no matter how long, is complete. The chaos we defy daily has to win in the end. No thought, no matter how deep, is ever finished. You loved art and spoke of it with great eloquence. You loved laughter and sought it out. No one can say you failed to make a difference. No one can say your life was without meaning. The words I recorded in 1996 echo in my mind and will echo until my own passing and perhaps beyond. No mind as good as yours, no thought as deep, ever vanishes entirely. You touch those who may not even know they were touched by you. The ocean gathers all its entities, living and dead, and moves deliberately on into the living air. For John M. Bennett, born 1942. I sailed on the sloop John B. Ooh, we capsized, baby, and look what we found. All the fishers of the deep blue sea. Oh, another poet who thinks Yeats couldn't tell a great-rooted blossomer from a tree. Yeats lasts, but at the expense of people understanding his work. Immortality is yours, dear poet, but no one will know the strangeness of your heart. I'll read the homage to Hilary Lachlanch. It's a sort of southern piece. It's called How Sad It Was When the Sky. We drove past the circus tent on the way to the mortuary. A freak standing there waved at us. When he smiled, he showed his gold tooth. I said, Mama, when will we get there? She said, shh, child, it isn't far. I said, Mama, why won't you tell me who's dead? She said, you'll see when we get there. The sky was a strange pink that day. I thought it looked like apocalypse. You'll know apocalypse when you see it, said Papa. Only open your heart to Jesus. On the far ridge of the mountain, there lived a murderer. We knew, but the police didn't. He was a nice, gentle man, and we didn't want the police to find him. I heard he had killed 5 people, but they weren't friends of mine either. There are people I wouldn't mind seeing dead, maybe the president. Mama says I shouldn't feel that way. Mama says every human soul is unique and every soul has its reasons, even a murderous soul. I told her I didn't believe in the soul, and she slapped my face. The mortuary loomed up ahead of us. It was smaller than I thought it might be, but it didn't look that different from a regular building. We went inside and were met by a man in a black suit. He had thin, slicked back hair. He looked southern, like us. You want to see the body, he said, and led us into a small room that smelled like stale paint. There was a small coffin there, like the coffin of a child. Its lid was open. When I peered inside, I wasn't surprised to see my body there. I was dressed in my best suit, and my hair was combed back in an unnatural way. You see, said Mama, it's very important to have a soul. Folks who don't believe in souls grow up to be the freaks in the circus. I thought how sad it was when the sky seemed to tell you the days of the earth were numbered, and soon we would all be goners. I'll finish with a very short poem called Garcia Lorca. Garcia Lorca murders the dove with an eraser of gold. He holds open the door so the wind can kiss the cheeks of the sisters of mercy. He bows to the fathers with an empty violin. On the tattered stoop, he watches as the children play ring-a-rosy and defends the sparrows on the rooftops of Spain. He turns to me with his marvelous eyes. He turns to me, his marvelous eyes. That's it.
That was a beautiful reading, a moving reading.
Thank you for publishing it.
Oh, that's really our honor. Yeah, I wanted to say a big congratulations to you, Jack. On the loss
I'm so happy with this book. Doubly happy. The illustrations are so beautiful. And Jerry Fabiano did that. And also Mark Fisher with his odd and very interesting, I'm not sure if I can find it here easily, but he did a wonderful collage.
Mark Fisher's collages are great. They're really very, very spirited.
Yeah, oh, they're marvelous. And
your character.
We did a book together. It's called, ekphrastic poems, and plus, with his pictures. And I called it Ekphras.
Yeah.
It hasn't been published yet.
Yeah, so while we're thanking Jerry Fabiano and Mark Fisher and Christopher Bernard for his wonderful essay on Jack, and then also debuting for laying out the book and the cover design and excellent, just all around big help to all of us.
To do about, you got stuff to say about all of that as well. So, yeah.
I want to say thank you to me. No, I'm just kidding.
I want to include you in the list. That's all.
Thank you. Now, I think we did go a little bit over an hour, but not too, pretty close. But I wanted to ask some of you who have joined us today. We've had 80 plus comments already. Yeah, which you'll get to go. Well, you'll get to go through and read.
One comment for each year. It should be 82.
Kelsey K. Parks in Durango says, truly a remarkable reading. Thank you, Jack.
You're most welcome. Thank you for listening.
So we could open up the floor if anybody has a question that they would like to pose. No pressure, but did want to just...
If we open up the floor, will we all fall through?
To hell. Orpheus will come after us. So I'm looking, it looks like everybody is pretty satiated with information. I'm going to give everybody about 5 more seconds to pop a question in there if you'd like to. No, they're just saying fabulous, Jack Foley, truly remarkable reading. Congratulations. Thank you. They're talking about Garcia Lorca. Oh, you've really set off some fabulous conversations, Jack. And I think that's one of the amazing things about poetry is that it exists in your heart and mind, which you've pointed out is manifold. And then there's the voice, and then there's the written word. But once
I would add, make it voices.
Voices, exactly. But then you put it in the book, and then people pick up the book and they read the poems, and then they're in relationship with the poetry, and the poems are reborn. Those marvelous eyes, as you say.
Yes. But they're also marvelous ears. And, and as I say, when Sangye and I didn't really do a multi-voice piece in which the voices go bam against one another. I have pieces like that. They're not in this book particularly, which is why I didn't do one. But the notion that the speech and the ability to put it on a CD or on the internet or whatever, the sound, shows that there are things that writing, the page, the book cannot capture. And that's important.
We're so lucky.
But we can, and vice versa. Oh, and vice versa. Absolutely. Thank you, honey.
Get Sangye in because she's so beautiful. I really
know she's a lot. Yeah, why don't you cover me?
So, Jack, we do have a question. And it's from G.E. Schwartz, and he says, Jack, how did you come up on using such drama in your reading?
I hear the poems that way. And remember, I think I come out of old radio. And there was a very interesting, there's a book, Eric A. Havelock wrote a very interesting book, a preface to Plato. And there was Walter J. Ong, who also wrote wonderfully on the subject of the oral in its relationship to the written. And all of these people, a whole bunch of people, were writing about the relationship of oral culture to written culture, a whole bunch. And why? And at the same time, in different places and unaware mostly of each other's work. And the answer to that was, we'd all been listening to the radio. Disembodied voices on the radio gave us that context. It was the radio before anything else. I was the last generation that primarily heard the radio until we shifted to TV. But I was the last generation that actually heard the radio. And at one point I said to myself, oh, we got a TV and I'm going to listen to all my radio programs too. And of course I didn't. And one day I thought, well, I'll go back and see what's happening on the radio shows. And every one of them was gone. And it was my fault. I hadn't listened to them. But that's what happened to everybody. But people my age know what it meant to have experienced the multiplicity of the mind as the multiplicity of voice. And I think that the notion of the voice of the poet, the individual voice, goes back to the subject of individuality, which is a false subject, and that people are multiple and multiverses themselves, you know, and that that experience of radio taught me that. And then The Wasteland taught me that. And then James Joyce taught me that. And then, you know.
Well, we do have another question. Jack, have you been a stage actor? And they just so is it Roberta Llewellyn says, Jack, have you been a stage actor? You were certainly compelling in your reading.
Thank you. No, I'm not a stage actor, partly because I don't want to be. I don't want to become a character. I had one experience, which was a wonderful experience. The poem is in this book. I won't read the poem, but a friend, it was, you know, like junior high or something, and we were in operetta, a Frimmel operetta or something. It's called The Fortune Teller, or Herbert. I think it's Victor Herbert. And we each had, a friend of mine and I each had the longest parts. We compared lines. We weren't the stars, but we had the longest parts in it. I was on stage first, and I was a ballet master. And I had a few lines to say. And my friend came in and we began a dialogue. My friend came in and gave me a line from the second act. I answered with another line from the second act, having nothing to do with that. And we went on in this way. We brought people on by cueing them. We took them off the stage, etc. We just did what we wanted to. Now, this was not an actual performance. It was a preview of what we're going to get.
Yeah.
We didn't do it in an actual performance. But finally, we just exited ourselves. It was an extraordinary experience. We broke into hysterical laughter. And of course, the director was furious, and we stopped laughing. And we stopped laughing, and never again. We won't do it again. But it was a marvelous experience of transgressive freedom. And if I learned a part in a play, believe me, I would always be tempted to do it again.
All right. Well, we'll keep you in the poetry verse, right?
Yes.
Where you really shine. And we also had a comment. I love when Sangye looks at the camera. Timeless beauty.
Yes, she is.
Oh, what a gift. Well, I want to thank you both so much for joining me here today.
Thank you, and thank you all who tuned in and said things and everything like that. I haven't seen any of you, so I don't know who you are. I know a couple of people told me they were going to listen. I hope Andreas Weiland was able to do it. It's late in Germany, but he wanted to. I hope he was able to.
You'll be able to go in and read all of the comments on the Igneus Press Facebook page. Yeah, this whole video will be there, and then all of the comments and so you'll be able to catch up on the conversation. So,
okay, and I can answer some. That'd be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. You can answer some. That'll be great, and then conversations can go on into the future. I want to thank everybody for joining us here today for the Igneus Press live book launch and reading by Jack Foley, celebrating his publication of his most recent opus, Creative Death, an Octogenarian's Wordshop. You can get it on the Igneus site. You can get it through the Facebook page, and also Jack will be receiving a whole lot. We've just ordered a second printing, so you'll be able to reach out to Jack for some copies as well.
Not for about at least a month. I won't get them.
Right. So Jack, you'll get yours by the end of next month. So we sort of work with a boutique.
Put the bite on me, especially if you buy a book and want me to sign it, and you bought it, from Igneus, which is fine. Mail it to me, and you have my email address. You have my home address.
Want to tell me your email address right now, and I'll type it in there?
Yeah, just email Igneus Press. They can give you my address. You can send me the book. I'll sign it and send it back to you. If you want to give return postage, that's great, but I'll do it anyway.
Okay, I put my email in there right there. Okay.
Oh, you'll get one.
I need you to sign me a copy, actually.
No. Well, I've only got 3 left here, or whatever it is.
Oh my gosh. Well,
and I want to give them to the people who were instrumental in the book. I gave one to Jerry Fabiano, but I need to give one to other people who gave me blurbs and things like that. Dana Joya hasn't gotten his yet, and so on and so forth. And David Mason, Sangye has one. But a lot of my friends and dear friends whom I want to have a copy of it don't have one.
Well, everybody will get one in the end that wants one. We'll make sure of that. You can just email us at info@igneuspress.com also, and then we'll make sure that we get a book in your hands. So blessings to you all. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to the next time, Jack and Sangye, that we can do this again. And have a beautiful afternoon.
Absolutely, you too. You certainly made ours beautiful.
Aw, this has been a lot of fun. It's always a lot of fun doing these live book launches, and your reading was just smashing today, Jack.
Well, if somebody can explain to me why my nose was itching so much, I'd be ever so grateful.
Maybe they were trying to get you to look like Slavoj Žižek does sometimes, back in the day. I don't know. But it was
maybe I'm soon becoming Cyrano de Bergerac. I don't know about
I don't know. Well,
Jimmy Durante says the nose knows. Okay.
Yeah. Have a beautiful afternoon. Thanks for joining us, Sangye. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.